There was a time when entire countries bent to the will of a single fruit merchant. Governments rose and fell, presidents were installed and removed, and millions of lives were shaped, not by armies or ideologies, but by bananas. At the center of this shadow empire stood one man, Sam Zemurray. He was never elected, he never wore a crown, and yet, for decades, he wielded more power in Central America than many heads of state. Zemurray did not merely build a business, he engineered coups, he rewrote foreign policy, he transformed nations into corporate assets. His story is one of the most extreme examples of unchecked capitalism in history, a rise from desperate poverty to absolute control, where profit justified everything and morality was treated as an inconvenience. At times, his story is ingenious, at times it is disturbing, and it shows what happens when private ambition is allowed to operate above the law. So let's go back to the beginning, back to a penniless immigrant with rotting bananas and nothing left to lose. Born with nothing. Sam Zemurray was born in 1877 in what is now Moldova, then part of the Russian Empire. He grew up Jewish, poor, and surrounded by violence and persecution. Like millions of others, his family fled to America in search of survival. When Sam arrived in the United States as a teenager, he spoke almost no English, had no education, and no connections. He settled in Alabama, not exactly a land of opportunity for a Jewish immigrant at the turn of the 20th century. Sam Zemurray started at the bottom, lower than most. The rotten banana insight. In New Orleans, bananas were becoming popular, but they spoiled quickly. Large fruit companies refused to deal with bananas that were overripe or bruised. They were thrown away at ports, sold for pennies, or left to rot. Zemurray noticed something everyone else ignored. Overripe bananas were still edible. They just had to be sold fast. So Sam borrowed money, bought rejected bananas dirt cheap, rushed them inland by train, and sold them to poor communities who didn't care about appearance, only price. It was ugly fruit, and it made him rich. By his early 20s, Sam Zemurray had made his first fortune, not by innovation, but by exploiting inefficiency. It became a pattern. From trader to tyrant. As Zemurray's profits grew, he realized something crucial. The real money wasn't in selling bananas, it was in controlling where they came from. That meant land, railroads, ports, governments. At the time, Central American countries were politically unstable, heavily indebted, and dependent on foreign trade. To Zemurray, they didn't look like nations. They looked like opportunities. Honduras, the first takeover. Zemurray set his sights on Honduras, a weak government desperate for foreign investment. When Honduran officials refused to give him tax breaks and land concessions, Zemurray didn't negotiate. He revolted. In 1911, Sam Zemurray funded and organized a coup against the Honduran government. He hired American mercenaries, supplied weapons, used ships he controlled. The coup succeeded. A new president was installed, one who immediately granted Zemurray massive land holdings, tax exemptions, and control over infrastructure. This wasn't bribery. This was regime change, ordered by a fruit merchant. From that moment on, Zemurray became known as the Banana Man. The birth of the Banana Republic. Zemurray's methods didn't stop at Honduras. Across Central America, governments learned a simple rule. If you worked with Zemurray, you stayed in power. If you worked against him, you didn't. He built railroads not to serve citizens, but to transport bananas. He built ports not for national trade, but for his ships. Entire economies were redesigned around his plantations. Local farmers were crushed, labor was exploited, Elections became formalities. These countries weren't colonies, but they weren't sovereign either. They were banana republics, nations whose primary function was to serve a foreign corporation, and Sam Zemurray was their king. The United Fruit Company War. At the peak of his power, Zemurray faced one rival larger than himself, United Fruit Company, the most powerful agricultural corporation in the world. Instead of fighting them from the outside, Zemurray did something smarter. He took them over from the inside. After a market crash weakened United Fruit, Zemurray quietly bought enough shares to seize control, then installed himself as president of the company. The man who once sold rotten bananas now controlled the largest fruit empire in history. Corporate power above governments. Under Zemurray, United Fruit became a shadow state. The company influenced U.S. foreign policy, worked with intelligence agencies, used American military power to protect its interests. When Guatemala attempted land reform that threatened United Fruit's holdings, Zemurray supported a CIA-backed coup in 1954. The democratically elected government was overthrown, a dictator was installed, and decades of civil war followed, all to protect banana profits. The cost of control. Millions lived under poverty wages. Labor strikes were crushed. Environmental damage was ignored. Zemurray justified everything as business. To him, nations were balance sheets. People were variables. Stability meant profitability. And for decades, it worked. The quiet end. In his later years, Zemurray became reclusive. He funded universities, donated art collections, attempted to clean his legacy. But history remembered him differently, not as a philanthropist, not as an innovator, but as the man who proved corporations could overthrow governments and face no consequences. Sam Zemurray died in 1961. His empire faded, but the system he perfected did not. Sam Zemurray never needed an army. He never needed a throne. He proved that economic power, when unchecked, is more dangerous than military force. And long before the world talked about corporate imperialism, globalization, or regime change, Zemurray was already practicing it, one banana at a time.